How do people walk in these things? Alright, so we're totally mixing it up today. I'm going to give you guys my first impressions ride video of the VAAST Magnesium gravel bike. Not only is it my first ride on the VAAST, but also my first ride in road clipless pedals. That's right, quasi-roadie. This is going to be the first ride this summer that I've not ridden in my Crocs. If you missed the previous video, I did a first impressions of the Kona Libre. I was literally riding some Crocs. I've swapped shoes, swapped pedals. So what makes this bike unique is that it is magnesium. So it's supposed to be 30% lighter than aluminum and titanium, all that good stuff, but just as strong. I'm not gonna read you all the marketing copy, but that's basically the value proposition of this material. It's competitively light with carbon fiber, but is an alloy. It does have a carbon fork, bottle mounts. So although the bike does look kind of racy, it does come equipped with fender and rack mounts. So that makes it a little bit utilitarian. This model also comes in two build kits. This is the 700. There's also a 650B, which I actually wish I had a chance to test, but this is what we got. And the tires on this are 700 by 38. So literally the most narrow tire I've ridden in the last couple years. So we'll see how this feels. I'm gonna take it on the similar loop I took the Kona Libre, and I take all the review bikes, and we'll see how it does. So let's hit the road. This is my first ride with road clipless. I've ridden mountain bike clipless before, which is a little bit easier because it's two-sided. So we'll see how this goes. Do I look pro?
So pro.
Yay! I have to say that these are the worst to walk in. Yay! It's not gonna be pretty today, guys, but it will be entertaining.
It will be entertaining. Yeah. It's gonna be entertaining for me.
Yay! I am not liking the road clipless.
I was a little worried for you at that stoplight.
Yeah. So this VAAST bike is probably the most roadie-like bike I've ridden in a while, but still surprisingly comfortable. I think the front end stack isn't so low, and there's enough spacers under there to get it at a pretty, comfortable level, even for me. Drivetrain is GRX 1x. I love the shape of these brake levers, have great braking power and feel. That said, gearing is a little steep, I think, for where we live and my level of fitness. I think it's a 42 tooth front cassette, and I'm not quite sure what the rear is, probably like a maybe 42. So first impressions on this flat, gravelly stuff. The bike overall definitely feels more responsive. This is kind of, in this configuration, I would say a roadie's version of a gravel bike. So kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum as the Kona Libre that I rode earlier today, but still fun. I mean, if you like a spicy handling bike, then this one's definitely for you. In terms of compliance, it does have a surprising amount to give. I'd love to try this in 650B because I think that would be even more magnified with that kind of suspension from the tire. Could be a lot harsher, can feel some give in the front end as well as the rear end. So far so good. It is a bike that I think when you give it some juice, it really responds and accelerates. Really curious to see how it performs in the climbs. Since it is a fairly light bike, I think on the scales, without the pedals, it came in just under 20 pounds. Okay, so that was the end of the kind of flattish gravel section. Did pretty well. Not as smooth as a longer wheelbase Kona Libre, but it did have a good amount of compliance. A lot more than I was expecting for something with such narrow tires and a carbon fork. So next part's gonna be our paved climb and our rocky climb. And I think this is where this bike should really shine. So we'll see, we shall see. Okay, so we're on the paved climb, and you can definitely feel the weight or the lack thereof. The gearing is definitely a little bit steeper than I would choose personally, but since it is a fairly light bike, you can get up and over this terrain with a little bit higher gearing than I would normally choose. On the scales, it weighed in at just under 20 pounds without pedals. So in terms of standing and climbing, it does have that kind of road DNA. It has that little kind of jerkiness when you stand on the pedals. Also, really interestingly, it does have a noticeably quicker turnover in the front end. And like I expected, this is where the bike performed really well. Just felt like a road bike, albeit with slightly bigger tires. You know, I don't have too many data points in terms of Magnesium bikes. I will say it does feel more compliant than, say, a carbon bike. Probably not quite as plush as a light tube steel bike, but surprisingly good. I think the real test, however, is going to be past that gate where we do kind of a chunky climb. I'm going to do some standing and climbing to see if the shorter wheelbase does lead to breaking the traction a lot earlier. And then of course, the chunky double track descent, which is my favorite test for all these gravel bikes. Okay, it's like a bajillion degrees.
It's way too hot today.
On this hard pack rocky climb, did pretty well. Did notice the lightweight was a lot easier to push this bigger gear up the hill. I did notice standing and climbing on certain spots that I rode with the Kona Libre, I was breaking traction. I mean, part of it is the shorter wheelbase, shorter rear end, smaller tire, all those things kind of contribute to that. But generally speaking, as a seated climber, did great. We're about to climb some chunky stuff. We'll see how much I get thrown around, and then we're also going to descend some chunky stuff, and that will be the real test to see how this fares as a gravel bike. So let's get going. We're getting slapped around a little bit, but the bike's still fairly compliant, all things considered. Alright, so we're at the top. Let's see how it does descending. Okay, just got off that first part of the descent, and it did pretty well. I was actually expecting it to be a lot more squirrely because I think the trail is in the 60s. I have to look it up, but it seemed fairly stable. Not quite as set it and forget it as the Libre. You do have to be a little bit more on top of it, but a lot more chill than I thought. In terms of frame compliance, I'd say this definitely feels noticeably softer than, say, a carbon frame. There's a good amount of flex in there. Not exactly sure where it's coming from, if it's just the tire or the frame or the carbon post or something, but smoother than I would have suspected. I bet the 650B version of this with the really wide tires is just super plush. We've got one more kind of rockier double track section, and then I'll wrap up the video. How's your bike?
Awesome, as always.
You envious of my Magnesium steed?
Sure.
Sure.
Not envious of those pedals.
That's
though.
true. Road pedals, why do they exist? Why are there not like mountain bike or SPD based power meters, pedal based power meters? I think that would make life so much easier. On this stuff, again, the bike did surprisingly well. Expecting a stiff and harsh ride because of the narrower tires than I'm used to, but surprisingly compliant. So yeah, who knew Magnesium and all this goodness? Pretty supple ride. Would have been super curious about the 650B version, but the 38mm tire version, doing pretty good. I might do a wheel swap and just see if that's possible and what the difference is like. But hopefully you enjoyed this first look at the VAAST A1 all-road bike. And if you missed our video review on the Kona Libre aluminum version, be sure to check out that link up here somewhere. And as always, keep the supple side down.